She wasn't late. She wasn't out of uniform. She was just black. And for that, a wealthy woman tried to humiliate her in front of an entire building. But what no one expected was who that nurse would call next. And what he did changed everything. The sun had barely risen over Crestline Heights when Ava Monroe zipped her Navy scrubs and stepped into her car. It was her third double shift this week, and she'd barely caught 4 hours of sleep, but none of that showed on her face. She was steady, polished, and focused like always. Ava didn't complain. That wasn't her style. She was a trauma nurse, a good one, and in 12 years of medical work, she had never once called out, never once arrived late, and never once raised her voice. That was something she carried like armor, not because it was easy, but because she knew she couldn't afford to be anything less than excellent. Not in a world that judged her skin before her skills. Today she was covering for a colleague at a private residential estate in the wealthy Maplewood district, the kind of neighborhood with 6-car garages and gates taller than most people's homes. Her agency had sent her last minute, but Ava didn't flinch. She knew how to carry herself. She was there for a patient, and she was used to walking into spaces that weren't built for people like her. What she wasn't used to was what waited for her at the front gate. The estate was perched behind white stone pillars and a circular drive lined with trimmed hedges. At the entrance, a woman in a cream-colored robe and designer sunglasses stood beside a black Mercedes. Her hair was perfectly coiled, her lips painted like she was going to brunch, not managing a medical emergency. Ava stepped out her car, clipboard in hand. "Good morning. I'm Nurse Ava Monroe from St. Jude's Private Care. I'm here to check on Mr. Bennett." The woman didn't move. She tilted her head, took one long look from Ava's curly bun down to her hospital-issued sneakers, then slowly crossed her arms. "You're the nurse?" she asked, her voice high and tight like a violin string. "Yes, ma'am. I was assigned this morning. I understand Mr. Bennett had a respiratory episode last night." The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she gave a bitter smile, the kind that wasn't really a smile at all. She stepped forward and planted herself squarely between Ava and the gate buzzer. "I don't think this is the right place," she said. "You must be looking for the back entrance. Deliveries and cleaning staff use the alley." Ava blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. She cleared her throat gently. "Ma'am, I'm not here for delivery. I'm the critical care nurse assigned to Mr. Bennett. His daughter requested." I said. The woman cut in. "This is a private residence. We don't let strangers just walk in." The word strangers hung in the air a beat too long. Ava remained calm. She was used to tone. She was used to being second-guessed. But something about the woman's posture wasn't just dismissive. It was blocking, guarding, as if her presence alone was a problem. "I have the medical authorization forms right here," Ava said, unfolding her clipboard. "And your father's emergency contact already approved." The woman's hand shot up. "Listen, I don't care who approved what. This is my home, and I'm telling you now, my father doesn't need your kind of help." Ava didn't answer. Her face was still, but her stomach had dropped a little. She'd heard this before, in quieter ways, in glances, in assumptions, but this was direct and loud enough for the gardener, now pausing at the side hedge, to hear. "Please," Ava said, her voice even. "He was prescribed 24-hour observation following last night's episode. He could be in danger if—" "Oh, he's fine," the woman snapped. "And I won't have someone who can't even present herself professionally giving him care. I am licensed. I worked with patients far more critical than—" "You people always have something to say," the woman said sharply. There it was. A line. A wall. An insult in plain sight, wrapped in a silk robe. The air went still. The gardener lowered his head and kept working, pretending not to hear. A delivery truck turned down the street and stopped halfway when it saw the scene. And Ava just stood there, perfectly still, because that's what she was taught to do. Not escalate, not feed it, just stand with dignity. Let silence say what words shouldn't. She reached calmly into her pocket and pulled out her phone. "I'm going to call the agency," she said. "Maybe they can clarify things with you." But the woman lunged toward her, pointing a long, lacquered nail. "Go ahead and call whoever you want. You're not stepping foot into this house. You understand me." "I understand," Ava said, "and I'll do my duty anyway." She stepped back toward her car, not to leave, but to access her secure agency line. That's when the woman leaned in closer and hissed, "Go back where you belong." Ava paused. It was quiet enough to hear the leaves fluttering on the trees. And then she dialed. Not her agency, not the hospital, someone else. A name she didn't use often. Not because she couldn't, but because she'd never wanted to. But today, she had reached her limit. The phone rang once, then again, and then a voice answered, low and firm. "Ava?" "Hey," she said, her tone composed. "I need a favor." The silence on the other end of the line lasted maybe a second, maybe less. But Ava knew what it meant. She had never asked him for anything before. Never once used his name, never mentioned who he was when filling out forms, never leaned on his title. Not even when her own job interviews felt like she was walking uphill in a storm. But today wasn't about pride or position. It was about respect. "I'm listening," said the voice on the other end. Ava closed her eyes briefly, steadying her breath. "I'm at a residence in Maplewood," she said. "Private patient case. The daughter won't let me in." "Is this about credentials?" "No, it's about how I look." Another pause. Then, "Send me the address." She did. No further questions. No dramatic words. Just the kind of silence that said something was already in motion. Ava slipped the phone back into her pocket and turned toward the gate again. The woman was still standing there, arms crossed, jaw tight, like a guard dog who'd claimed the land. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Ava hadn't left. "I told you already," she snapped. "I don't care what agency sent you." "I didn't call the agency," Ava said quietly. A flicker of confusion, then indignation. "Excuse me. I didn't call the agency," Ava repeated. "But someone else will be here shortly." The woman rolled her eyes so hard it was almost theatrical. "You called your boyfriend or something?" "What? Am I supposed to be scared now?" Ava didn't flinch. "You should be respectful. That's all I ever asked for. You think you could just walk into my home and make demands?" "No," Ava said. "I came to help your father. That's it. But I won't be spoken to like a stray." The woman scoffed. "You're in the wrong neighborhood, sweetheart. Around here, we don't get intimidated by attitude." Ava didn't respond. Instead, she sat on the edge of her car, legs crossed at the ankle, hands folded neatly. Not storming off, not arguing, just waiting. Waiting for the wind to shift. Inside the house, a window curtain twitched. Mr. Bennett's nurse aide, one of the overnight assistants, peered through the glass and quickly turned away. Ava saw it. The aide had seen her, had heard at least some of what was happening, but said nothing. Not her fight, maybe, not her business. That's how it always started. A few more minutes passed. The woman's irritation began to show in her posture, arms tighter, lips pressed thin. She pulled out her phone and began texting furiously, probably contacting her private agency, trying to cancel Ava's visit or report her before anything else could unfold. And that's when the black SUV pulled into the drive. Not fast, not loud, just smooth, intentional, and without hesitation. It stopped behind Ava's car, engine still running. The woman turned around, frowning at the unfamiliar vehicle. Her eyes scanned it like it didn't belong. A moment later, the back door opened, and a tall, clean-shaven white man in a navy suit stepped out. He didn't wear sunglasses. He didn't carry a clipboard or briefcase. His only accessory was presence, quiet, controlled, and unmistakably commanding. Ava didn't move. She didn't wave. She didn't have to. The woman narrowed her eyes. "Who the hell is—" "Good morning," the man said calmly, walking past the SUV and approaching the gate. His tone wasn't angry. It wasn't friendly either. It was clipped, professional, just enough to make every word hit harder. The woman raised a hand. "This is private property. I don't know what you think." "I'm well aware," the man said. "And I won't stay long. I just have a question." She blinked. "I received a call," he continued, eyes on her now, "from Nurse Ava Monroe. I understand you denied her access to her patient." The woman's face twitched. "Look, I don't know who you are, but this is my house. You denied her access based on what?" "Exactly?" he asked, a little more firm now. "I don't answer to strangers," she said, lifting her chin. He nodded slowly, then reached into his pocket and held out a black leather badge wallet. "Not police. Not military. Government. The gold seal glinted in the sun. Her eyes widened and her voice caught. Wait, I'm Governor Harrison Creed, he said quietly. And Ava Monroe is not just a nurse. She's my goddaughter. The air changed. Visibly. Audibly. Even the wind seemed to pause. I suggest you explain, clearly, why you blocked a licensed healthcare professional from attending to a critical patient in your home. The woman stammered. I didn't know. That's not the question. I thought she was a contractor. Or staff. I didn't recognize. You didn't recognize professionalism when it stood right in front of you, the governor said. Because you weren't looking for professionalism. You were looking for something to dismiss. The woman took a small step back. Look, I was just being cautious, okay? She didn't have a uniform. She was in scrubs, he said, with ID and credentials. But none of that mattered to you, did it? Ava stood silently to the side, her hands still clasped. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't even angry. Just tired. Just waiting for people to finally see what she always had to carry. I didn't mean any disrespect, the woman said, voice suddenly fragile. No, the governor said. You meant control and humiliation, and you exercised it because you thought no one would hold you accountable. He stepped aside then, motioning gently toward Ava. She's going in now. You will not stop her. The woman's lips moved like she wanted to argue, but no sound came. She nodded, just barely. Ava stepped forward, past the stone pillars, past the woman who now looked smaller than before. She didn't glance back, didn't need to. As she reached the front door, the overnight aide opened it wordlessly and stepped aside. And behind her, Governor Creed turned to the woman one last time. You should reflect, he said, because the real shame isn't what happened here today. It's how long you've likely been getting away with it. Then he got back into the SUV and drove off. Not for headlines, not for applause, but because sometimes power is meant to protect, not just punish. The door closed softly behind her. Inside the Bennett estate, the air was thick with lemon polish, silence, and tension that hadn't yet cleared. The hallway stretched wide and echoing, flanked by marble floors and gold-framed family portraits that hung like reminders of old money. Ava moved quietly, as she always did. No fuss, no attitude, just presence, solid, focused, and calm. The overnight aide, a young woman in a plain white blouse, didn't say much as she led Ava upstairs. Just a murmur this way, and the faint click of her flats on the floor. At the top of the grand staircase was a room with the door already cracked. Inside, sunlight filtered through half-drawn curtains. The bed was large, draped in white linens, and beside it sat a pale, gaunt man with an oxygen tube under his nose and a tremor in his hands. Mr. Bennett. His eyes lifted the moment she entered. Sharp, tired, and immediately aware of who she was. You're Nurse Monroe? He asked, voice scratchy but curious. Ava nodded, setting her bag down gently. Yes, sir. Ava Monroe, here to check your vitals and run through the follow-up protocol from last night's episode. He studied her a moment longer, then gave a slow, raspy smile. My daughter give you a hard time? Ava paused, but only briefly. She had questions, she said evenly. He chuckled, a dry, tired sound. That's one way to put it. She's protective and proud. Gets it from her mother. He didn't ask for details. Didn't pretend he didn't know why there might have been conflict. But the way he looked at her, steady, acknowledging, said enough. Thank you for coming, he added. I was worried they'd send someone who didn't know what they were doing. You got the opposite, Ava said simply, already pulling out her stethoscope and gloves. Let's get you checked out. She moved with quiet efficiency, her hands steady and her tone gentle. She asked questions, how his breathing felt, if he'd eaten, how long the pain in his chest had lasted. Mr. Bennett answered between breaths, sometimes drifting off mid-sentence. The aide took notes. After 20 minutes, Ava stepped back and reviewed the readings. Oxygen levels are a little low, but better than expected, she said. No signs of cardiac distress. But you do need to avoid stress and keep the airflow steady. No alcohol, no satais, no argumes. He cracked a tired smile. No promises on that last one. She gave a half smile back, just enough. Then, as she packed up her tools, he said something that made her pause. I asked for you, you know. Ava turned. I was told it was a random assignment. It was supposed to be, but I made a call. Told them I wanted someone who knew what it meant to show up when nobody else did. Her brow furrowed slightly. You met me before? No, he said, but I saw your name come up in a file once. My company had donated to St. Jude's. I read the story of a nurse who stayed 36 hours during Hurricane Calvin, refused to leave her patients behind even when the generator failed. He looked at her like that moment, that one choice, had told him everything he needed to know. I said, send her. Ava didn't answer for a long second. Then she nodded. I didn't know that. I didn't tell my daughter. She wouldn't have approved. She still doesn't, Ava said softly. He looked toward the window. She never understood that sometimes dignity isn't about status. It's about choice and sacrifice. There was a long silence. Then, unexpectedly, Mr. Bennett said, Do you know what I used to be? I know your name is on several university libraries, Ava said carefully. He chuckled. And a few buildings I don't even remember writing checks for. But before all that, I was a medic in the Navy. That caught her attention. 1968, he said. Vietnam. First time I saw death was 2 feet away, and I couldn't stop it. I was 20. Thought I was invincible. Ava nodded. She'd worked with veterans. She understood the language of memory. I watched men bleed out in the mud, and I couldn't save them, he said. But I remember the ones who lived. And I remember the corpsman who held pressure on a wound for 23 minutes straight, screaming for someone to keep the man awake while mortar shells landed behind us. His voice cracked. She looked like you. Ava didn't speak. She didn't need to. He continued, When you showed up today, I saw her face. Different woman. Same steel in the eyes. She adjusted the 4 drip quietly, letting him talk. He wasn't just telling her war stories. He was handing her something. Trust. History. Maybe regret. I try to raise my daughter to respect people, he said. But you can't always teach what you never had to fight for yourself. Another silence. Then he asked, You gonna stay the night? I wasn't scheduled for overnight, Ava replied. I'd like it if you would. She considered, then nodded. I'll inform the agency. He looked relieved. And just as she turned to step out, he said one last thing. When this is over, you'll hear from me again. Ava raised a brow. He didn't explain. Downstairs, the mood was colder. The daughter stood stiffly in the living room, phone in hand, not texting, just holding it like a weapon she'd forgotten how to use. When Ava passed her on the way to the kitchen, there was no eye contact. No epalegi, just silence. But Ava didn't need one. She'd stopped needing permission a long time ago. What she needed, and what she had earned, was space. Space to do her job, to be excellent, uninterrupted. And this time, thanks to a single phone call and a name most people didn't know she had, the space was finally hers. The next morning, sunlight poured through the lace-trimmed curtains of the Bennett estate like nothing had ever happened. The breeze rustled through manicured hedges. The pool cleaner hummed at the far end of the yard, and birds chirped over the scent of fresh citrus from the garden. But inside the house, the tension from the day before hadn't left. It clung to the hallways, settled in the corners, followed Ava like a shadow that hadn't made up its mind yet. She'd stayed overnight at Mr. Bennett's request, checked on him every few hours, adjusted his oxygen, monitored his blood pressure, listened when he couldn't sleep, never once bringing up what happened at the gate. Because Ava had work to do, and she wasn't going to let anyone's shame get in the way of a man's recovery. But someone else couldn't stop thinking about it. In the grand living room downstairs, Veronica Bennett, daughter, heiress, self-appointed household guardian, was pacing. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, neighbors, the family's legal team, and one name stood out among the rest. Governor Harrison Creed. His visit to her property the day before hadn't gone unnoticed. The SUV, the badge, the confrontation. Even the gardener had mentioned it, casually, in a conversation that somehow ended up back at the country club. Now her hand shook just slightly as she dialed. Hello. Governor Creed's office, said a clipped assistant on the other end. Veronica took a breath. Smooth her blouse. Yes, hi. This is Veronica Bennett. I need to speak with Governor Creed. It's regarding yesterday's misunderstanding. A pause. Then one moment. It wasn't even a full 30 seconds before the voice came on the line. "This is Creed." "Governor," she said quickly. "I'm so glad I could reach you. I just wanted to clarify." "There's nothing to clarify," he said. "I saw what I needed to." Veronica hesitated. "I think there may have been some miscommunication." Nurse Monroe arrived unexpectedly. "I was simply trying to protect my father's privacy." "No," he said. "You were trying to protect your perception of control." "Excuse me." Creed's voice remained calm, measured. "I didn't come yesterday to embarrass you, Ms. Bennett. If I want to make a public statement, I would have done it differently. But after the calls we've received this morning, I'm beginning to wonder if silence helps anyone anymore." Veronica's throat went dry. "What calls?" "I don't know who filmed it, but someone did. Your behavior at the gate is now on 3 social platforms and climbing. Hashtags, shares, comments." She sat down. Fussed. "Wait, what?" "That wasn't meant for." "It never is." There was a rustle on his end. A pause. Then, "My office has already issued a statement. We're not naming names. But I made it clear that no public servant, nurse, teacher, firefighter, soldier, should ever be denied basic dignity for doing their job." Veronica's heart pounded. "Governor, please. This could ruin my family's reputation. We have events, fundraisers. My father is recovering peacefully," Creed said, "because a nurse showed up and did her job despite your efforts to block her. I didn't know she was your goddaughter." "That's the problem," Creed said. "You shouldn't need to know someone's status to treat them like a human being." Silence. "I'd like to apologize," she said quietly. "To Ava. She didn't ask for one. But I want to." "She didn't ask for that either." The line went cold for a moment. Then Creed added, "You'll have the chance. But I suggest you listen more than you speak." He hung up. Upstairs, Ava had just finished changing Mr. Bennett's bag when the door creaked open. Veronica stood in the doorway, hands folded, no makeup, eyes swollen, as if she'd finally stopped running from a reflection. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said softly. Ava didn't look up. "You didn't." Veronica stepped inside. The weight in her posture was different now. Not angry, not defensive. Just tired. "I wanted to say something," she offered. Ava glanced over. Not angry, just unreadable. Veronica's voice cracked. "I've been in control of this house since my mother passed," she said. "I thought that meant I had to guard every inch of it. Decide who belonged, who didn't." Ava remained silent. "And I know I was wrong. Yesterday, I saw you, and I didn't even stop to think about anything except that you weren't what I expected." Still, Ava said nothing. Veronica swallowed hard. "That wasn't about you. That was about me. My ignorance. My fear of letting go. But you didn't let it stop you. You stood your ground. And then you still stayed to help my father." A beat of silence. "That takes more grace than I've ever had." Ava finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "You thought your house needed protecting. But it's your heart that's been under lock and key." Veronica blinked. "I didn't realize it. You weren't meant to," Ava said. "People like me are taught to spot closed doors. People like you are taught to hold the key, but never question who gave it to you." Veronica nodded slowly. "Can I ask you something?" "You could try. Why did you stay? After what I said?" Ava looked at her. "Because I'm not here for you." Veronica's eyes welled. "I understand." "No," Ava said softly, "but you will." By that evening, the video had reached over 500,000 views. It wasn't sensational. It wasn't explosive. Just a quiet moment caught on camera. A black nurse in scrubs, standing calmly outside a white estate, being told to leave. And then, the arrival of the governor. A short clip, a long conversation, a national headline. And in the middle of it all, Ava Monroe, still doing her rounds, still showing up on time, still choosing professionalism over pettiness. Not for applause, not for credit, but because some people know how to lead, even when no one's following. The days that followed moved quietly. Inside the Bennett estate, Ava kept doing her job, checking vitals, administering meds, changing linens, updating charts. She was steady, focused, immune to the noise swirling just outside the gates. But the world wasn't quiet. The video of her confrontation at the gate had gone viral, and not just in passing. It was clipped into news broadcasts. picked up by local stations. Hashtagged under hashtag let her in and hashtag respect the uniform. Shared by nurses, teachers, parents, activists, even a few quiet celebrities who posted without saying a word, just letting the clip speak for itself. Ava didn't have a TikTok. She didn't follow trends. But even she couldn't avoid the headlines that began to follow her name. Nurse denied entry to patient's home goes viral. Governor intervenes. Grace under pressure. The nurse who chose dignity over drama. She hadn't posted a thing. She hadn't needed to. And yet, the world was watching. Underscore. One morning, while refilling Mr. Bennett's medication tray, Ava heard a knock at the front door. Veronica answered it. Ava didn't move, but she could hear the voice. Female, hesitant, slightly older. Hi, is Nurse Ava Monroe here? There was a pause. She is, Veronica said. May I ask whose? Tell her, it's Eleanor Finch. From Southridge Hospital. She may not remember me. Ava froze. She did remember. Eleanor Finch had been her supervisor at Southridge. A strict, by-the-book charge nurse who once wrote Ava up for speaking too directly to a patient's family. A woman who smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. A woman who hadn't stood up for her when Ava was passed over, twice, for promotion. Ava walked slowly down the stairs, stopping just past the entryway. Eleanor, she said, calm and measured. Eleanor turned. Her expression wasn't smug. It wasn't overly apologetic either. It was something else. Uneasy, curious, respectful even. I just wanted to stop by, Eleanor said. I saw the video. I didn't know everything you've been carrying. Ava crossed her arms lightly. You worked with me for 3 years. I know, Eleanor said, and I'm not here to rewrite that. I needed to say something. Ava waited. You were always the one who stayed late, who took the cases no one wanted, who held the hand of patients who didn't have families. I saw it. I just didn't say it. That's right, Ava said. Eleanor's voice cracked. I should have. There was a beat. Then Ava said quietly, why now? Eleanor swallowed. Because the world's listening to you now. And I don't want to be someone who only found her voice when it was safe. Ava studied her for a moment, then offered a small nod. That's a start. Eleanor blinked, surprised by the softness in Ava's tone. Then, from her coat pocket, she pulled out an envelope. This is from the board at Southridge. They want to meet with you, to offer an apology, and to talk about a leadership position. Ava raised an eyebrow. Now they want me to lead. They wanted you to before, Eleanor admitted. They were just afraid of the conversations it would start. And now they're afraid of what happens if they stay quiet. Eleanor didn't deny it. I'm not saying it's perfect, she said, but maybe it's a step. Ava took the envelope, not because she needed it, but because she'd earned the right to decide what came next. Thank you, she said. Eleanor nodded slowly, then turned to leave. As the door closed, Veronica, who had stayed off to the side the whole time, looked at Ava with something new in her eyes. Not pity, not guilt, respect. Real, earned, undeniable respect. That afternoon, Mr. Bennett was having a good day. He sat propped up in bed, sipping tea and watching the news with the volume low. When Ava entered with his afternoon meds, he muted the TV and gestured to the chair beside him. Sit a minute, he said, if you're not rushing off. Ava obliged, folding her hands in her lap. I heard you had a visitor, he said. The nurse from Southridge. She nodded. Word travels. It always does when the world starts paying attention, he said. Ava didn't say anything. Mr. Bennett looked at her carefully. You ever think about politics? She gave a half laugh. Not once. You should, he said. You've got more strength in your silence than most people have in a podium. She smiled faintly. I'm a nurse. I like fixing what I can touch. He nodded. But sometimes, presence is the fix. People don't forget how you made them feel. There was a knock at the door again. This time it was the aide. There's someone here to see Nurse Monroe, she said, slightly breathless. Ava stood. Who is it? He didn't say his name, just handed me this. She extended a business card. It was black, embossed, and bore a single title: Office of the Surgeon General, U.S. Public Health Service. Ava stared at it. "I'll be right down," she said. The man at the door was in his late 50s. White hair, sharp suit, calm demeanor. He didn't speak immediately, just extended his hand. "Ms. Monroe," he said, "we've been following your work for a long time. The country could use more voices like yours. Would you be open to having a conversation?" She looked at him, then at the card again. She wasn't sure what to say, but for the first time in a long time, maybe ever, she realized she had options. Not just routes to survive, but choices, real ones. And all because one day, someone tried to shut her out. And she stood still, not to fight, but to show what quiet dignity can do when the world finally stops to notice. The letter arrived in an envelope with no return address. Thick paper, soft to the touch, sealed with a gold embossed emblem. Ava found it tucked between a patient folder and a clipboard in her bag. She hadn't seen anyone place it there. She didn't open it right away. She didn't need to. Some things tell you they matter just by how they wait. She sat with it in the break room after her shift, staring at it while the vending machine hummed behind her and someone's leftover coffee burned on the warmer. The house she'd left that morning, the Bennett's estate, had been quiet. Too quiet. Mr. Bennett was fading. Not in some tragic, sudden way. No drama. No code blue. Just slowly, like a lamp dimming at dusk. That morning, he'd asked for her by name. He was weaker, eyes duller, but when Ava entered the room, he smiled like he'd been waiting just for her. "Sit with me," he whispered. So she did. "I wrote something," he said, voice barely above breath. "Had my lawyer finalize it yesterday. You should be resting." "I will," he said, "but you need to know what's coming." Ava's brows furrowed. He reached beside him, shaky fingers fumbling slightly, and pulled out a small folder from the nightstand. Inside, a single page. Typed, signed, stamped with a legal seal. "I've added your name to my foundation's board," he said. Ava blinked. "Sir, you'll be listed as Senior Advisor on Community Health Equity," he said. "It's not just ceremonial. You'll have funding power, discretion, influence." She stared at him. "I don't need your charity." His voice sharpened. "This isn't charity. This is legacy. Mine. And yours." He coughed. Ava reached for a glass of water, helped him sip. "When my wife died," he said after a moment, "I realized all the plaques in the world don't hold your hand at the end. But people do, and they remember who showed up when others didn't." Ava didn't reply. She couldn't. "I want my money to mean something real," he continued. "Not just buildings with names, but people who carry the weight quietly, like you." She set the folder down. "Why me?" He looked her dead in the eye. "Because I've watched men lead countries with less composure than you showed at that front gate." She felt something tighten in her throat. He smiled softly. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you'll accept the gesture." A long pause. Then she nodded, and he relaxed, like something inside him had just been set free. 2 days later, the world found out. A press release, then a press conference, then headlines. Former billionaire CEO adds viral nurse to legacy trust. Ava Monroe named equity chair in $20 million health initiative. The nurse they tried to turn away now holds the key. Ava kept working. She wasn't interested in photo ops. But her name? It was everywhere. And it wasn't about fame. It was about meaning. The video that had once been seen as a single spark, just another quiet injustice, had ignited something. In Texas, a group of student nurses started a campaign called #StandLikeAva. In Georgia, a black physician opened a scholarship in her name. In D.C., 3 members of Congress mentioned her during a healthcare reform vote. She hadn't asked for any of it. She just hadn't backed down. It was a Thursday when Ava returned to the Bennett house one last time. Not for work, not for closure, just to sit. Mr. Bennett had passed peacefully in his sleep that morning. The house was still, the air softer. Even Veronica seemed different now. Not polished, not poised, just present. She met Ava at the door, her expression unreadable. But then she did something Ava didn't expect. She stepped aside and gestured her in. No questions, no hesitation. Ava walked past her. The same marble floors, the same paintings, but this time, no gate to block her. No raised voice to question her presence. Just space. She sat at Mr. Bennett's bedside one last time. No machines, no tubes, just the quiet, and the feeling that something had shifted, not just in this house, but in her life. She pulled a photograph from her bag, the one she kept in her wallet. Her mother, in her old nursing uniform, smiling through exhaustion. It had faded at the edges. Ava placed it gently on the nightstand. She would have liked you, she whispered. Or at least the version of you that learned. She stood and left without looking back. Weeks passed. Ava's inbox filled with invites. Panels, interviews, book deals, TV producers asking about movie rights. She declined them all. Instead, she used her new title to start something no one expected. A mobile clinic, unbranded, unfunded by name, but fully stocked and staffed. Focused on underserved communities. Focused on healing, not headlines. She called it Second Entry, because for people like her, for stories like hers, sometimes the second time in is when the real work begins. On a rainy afternoon, as she packed supplies into the back of the van, a familiar voice called out from across the lot. She turned. It was Veronica. No SUV, no assistant, just a navy coat, wet at the shoulders. I didn't come to make a scene, she said quickly. Ava waited. I wanted to thank you for not slamming the door back in my face. Ava nodded. Veronica took a deep breath. I've started volunteering at a women's shelter. I figured it's time I start listening more. Ava gave her a faint smile. It's a good place to start. Veronica looked down. My father's will mentioned you. Said he hoped I'd learn from your strength. A pause. I'm still trying. Ava didn't say much. She just extended a clipboard toward her. Can you carry this to the van? Veronica blinked, then took it without hesitation. And for the first time in both their lives, they walked forward together. Not as enemies, not as titles, just two women, finally moving in the same direction. Because legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you stand for when the door won't open, and what you build once it finally does.